The Highway Ultimatum, Chapter 1, The Road to Nowhere. The Arizona sun beat down, relentless, through the car window. 72 years. 72 years I'd lived, and I still wasn't used to this kind of heat. But my heart felt a warmth that transcended the desert air. I was moving, finally. Moving from my large, empty house, the one I'd worked my entire life to pay off, every brick, every shingle, to a cozy, smaller place, closer to my son, David, closer to his wife, Amber, closer to my sweet granddaughter, Sarah. I'd given them the big house, just given it, a gift, an act of love. David, my only child, had been overjoyed. Amber, usually so guarded, had actually smiled. A wide, genuine smile. "Oh, Martha, thank you. This changes everything," she'd gushed. I'd seen a rare spark of genuine gratitude in her eyes, and it had filled me with a quiet joy. I'd done right by my family. I had set them up. The moving process had been emotional. I sold most of my furniture, packed my sentimental treasures into a handful of boxes. My life neatly condensed into a few essential items. David had promised to handle the legal transfer of the house once we were settled. A formality, I thought. My lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, had drawn up the initial paperwork, but I'd told him to hold off on the final signature until I was in my new place. I didn't see the rush. It was family, after all. The drive itself was long. David was behind the wheel, Amber beside him in the passenger seat, me in the back, gazing out at the endless expanse of the desert. We'd been on the road for hours, the miles blurring into a monotonous ribbon of asphalt. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me. My stomach churned. The heat, the motion, it was too much. "David," I said, my voice a little weak, Could we stop at the next gas station? I feel a bit lightheaded. I just need some water, maybe a few minutes to rest." David glanced in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with concern. "Of course, Mom. There should be a station up ahead." Amber, from the front seat, sighed, a sharp, impatient sound. "Really, Martha? We're so close. Can't you just wait?" "It's just for a minute, Amber," David said, his voice firm. "Mom doesn't feel well." He took the next exit, a lonely stretch of road leading to a single, isolated gas station and a dusty, dilapidated convenience store. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and hot asphalt. I slowly climbed out of the car, my legs a bit unsteady. The heat hit me like a physical blow. "I'll just grab a water," I mumbled, reaching for my purse, which was in the back seat. "Oh, don't worry about it, Martha," Amber said, her voice strangely bright. "David can get it. Just sit for a minute." I nodded, grateful. I walked a few steps away from the car, leaning against a rusty gas pump, closing my eyes. Trying to clear my head, the dizziness was overwhelming. I heard the car door close, heard the engine hum. I opened my eyes. David was backing out. Amber was in the passenger seat, her face impassive. My mind, still a little foggy, struggled to process. They were leaving the pump. But I hadn't gotten my water. I raised my hand, a weak gesture. "David, what are you doing? My water." Amber turned, her gaze meeting mine. Her eyes, usually cold, were now filled with a chilling, almost triumphant, indifference. Her mouth a thin, cruel line. And then she spoke, her voice clear, distinct, cutting through the hum of the engine. "Mom can wait," she said, her voice flat. "We need to go." And then they were gone. The car, a small dot against the vast, empty horizon, sped away, leaving me standing there, alone, on a desolate stretch of highway, in the blazing Arizona sun. My purse, my phone, my small bag with my essentials, all in the car, with them. The shock hit me first. A wave of disbelief so profound it almost made me laugh. This wasn't happening. This was a nightmare. Then the terror, the heat, the emptiness. No one around. Just the oppressive silence of the desert. And the overwhelming, sickening realization. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. An act of abandonment, a cruel, calculated betrayal. Chapter 2. Dust and Dollars. My legs gave out. I sank to the hot asphalt, my mind racing, frantically trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. How could they? My own son, after everything, after I had given them my home. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The sun beat down relentlessly. My throat was dry. Panic clawed at my chest. I had no money, no phone, just the clothes on my back. Then, a flicker of movement. A large semi-truck rumbling slowly into the gas station. Hope, raw and desperate, surged through me. I stumbled to my feet, waving my arms frantically. The truck driver, a burly man with a kind face, looked at me, perplexed. "Everything all right, ma'am?" "No," I choked out, my voice raspy. "No, nothing is all right. My son, he left me. He just drove away." He listened, his eyes widening in disbelief, then pity. "Get in, ma'am," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. "I'll get you to the nearest town. You look like you're about to collapse." He drove me to a small town about 20 miles down the road, a dusty place with a diner and a single motel. He lent me his phone. My hands trembled as I dialed Sarah's number. My sweet granddaughter. My only comfort. Sarah answered, her voice bright, then quickly turning to alarm. "Grandma, where are you? Mom said you decided to stay with friends, that you changed your mind about coming to the new house right away." My blood ran cold. The lie, so swift, so calculated. "Sarah, listen to me," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor. "Your mother and father left me at a gas station, on the highway. They abandoned me." A stunned silence, then a gasp. "No, they wouldn't. Dad would never." "They did, sweetheart," I said, the pain in my voice raw. "They did." Sarah, bless her heart, quickly called David. I could hear her frantic whispers through the phone. Then David called me. His voice was laced with an awkward apology. "Mom, we are so sorry. We didn't realize you were so unwell. Amber thought you just wanted to wait for us to go to the store. And then, well, we were in such a hurry. We just pulled out without thinking. We thought you'd be right behind us." A transparent lie, a pathetic excuse. "You saw me, David," I said, my voice cold, devoid of emotion. "Amber looked me right in the eye. She told you to leave, and you did." He mumbled, he stammered, he apologized again, but he didn't offer to come back. He didn't offer to help. He was trapped, under Amber's thumb, a gutless wonder. The rage, which had been a simmering ember, now roared to life, a roaring inferno. My son, my daughter-in-law, They had played me for a fool, taken my generosity, my love, and twisted it into a weapon. They had taken my house, the symbol of my life's work, and in return, left me for dead on a desert highway. But then, a flicker, a thought. The house. The house was a gift. But had the paperwork gone through? I called Mr. Jenkins, my lawyer. He answered, his voice calm, professional. Mr. Jenkins, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. About the house, the one I intended to gift to David and Amber. Yes, Martha. I have the deed of transfer ready for your signature. I just need you to come in when you're settled. It hasn't been signed yet, then? I asked, my heart pounding with a sudden, fierce hope. The transfer isn't complete? No, Martha, he confirmed. Not until your signature is notarized. You are still the legal owner of record. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I could play dirtier. They wanted to discard me? Fine. I would discard them and their sense of entitlement. Chapter 3. The Call of the Desert. The kind truck driver, bless his soul, offered to let me stay at the motel for a night. I refused. My anger, my indignation fueled me. I needed to get back to my house, to my property, to what was legally still mine. I found a bus ticket to Phoenix, a long, uncomfortable journey. From Phoenix, another bus to the small town where my house stood. It took nearly 24 hours. Every mile, every bump in the road only hardened my resolve. I arrived at my old street, the familiar tree-lined avenue, my heart a complex mix of grief, rage, and grim determination. The house stood there, solid, familiar, a monument to my foolish generosity. I still had my old spare key, hidden under a loose brick by the back porch. I pushed it open. The house was in a state of disarray. Not quite as bad as Chris's prior living situations, but clearly neglected. Boxes of my remaining items, packed and ready for my new smaller home, were still sitting untouched in the hallway. My precious photo albums, my grandmother's antique quilt, all still there. I hadn't even bothered to move them. And then I saw it. My favorite armchair, covered with a cheap, gaudy throw. My antique side table, now cluttered with Amber's endless array of fashion magazines. They had already started to colonize my space, to erase my presence. A fresh wave of fury washed over me. I pulled out my phone, the one the truck driver had lent me, still cradled in my hand. I dialed David's number. He answered, his voice wary. Mom, are you all right? Where are you? I'm in my house, David, I said, my voice cold, calm. My house, the one you and Amber seem to think you own. A stunned silence. Then Amber's voice, sharp, impatient in the background. Who is it, David? Tell them we're busy. It's Mom, David mumbled. She's bluffing. Amber's voice, louder now, cutting through the phone. She can't do anything. The house is ours. It's not yours, Amber, I said, my voice ringing with cold authority. Not yet. The deed was never signed. The transfer was never finalized. I am still the legal owner of this property, and I want you out. Another silence. Then Amber snatched the phone from David, her voice laced with contempt. You old hag, you think you can scare us? After you promised us the house? We have your word. It's morally ours. Morality went out the window when you left your 72-year-old mother-in-law on the side of a desert highway, alone and without a penny. I countered, my voice as sharp as glass. You have exactly 24 hours to vacate this property. Take what belongs to you. Leave what belongs to me. If you're not out by then, I will be selling this house, and you will be left with nothing." "You wouldn't dare," she shrieked. "Try me," I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from a righteous fury. The gauntlet had been thrown. The battle had begun. Chapter 4. The clock ticks. The next 24 hours were a strange mix of anxiety and grim satisfaction. I called Mr. Jenkins again. He listened, his silence on the other end of the line eloquent. "Martha," he finally said, his voice tinged with concern. "This is extreme. Are you absolutely sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Mr. Jenkins," I said, my voice unwavering. "They abandoned me. They stole my peace of mind, and they tried to steal my house. They have no right to it. Not anymore." He sighed. "Very well. I will begin the process of preparing the house for an immediate sale. It's a prime property, given its location and condition. We should find a buyer quickly." I spent the rest of the day in my house, the house that was still mine, carefully gathering my remaining personal items, my grandmother's quilt, my photo albums, the few pieces of sentimental furniture I hadn't sold. I packed them into a small rental car I'd arranged. I didn't want any of my precious memories tainted by their presence. I waited for a call, for a knock on the door, for David and Amber to come, perhaps to beg, to apologize. But nothing. The silence of the house was punctuated only by the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hall. Each tick a slow, deliberate countdown. The 24 hours came and went. No sign of them. Amber's arrogant dismissal. David's spineless silence. It confirmed everything. They truly believed I was bluffing. They truly believed they had won. Fools. I went back to Mr. Jenkins' office. He had already moved quickly. He had a pre-qualified buyer, eager for a quick close. The house was valuable. Its location near a desirable school district, its spacious layout, its well-maintained structure, all contributed to its appeal. The offer was generous. "Are you certain, Martha?" Mr. Jenkins asked one last time, his gaze searching. "Once you sign, there's no turning back. They will be out, and you will have severed all ties with your son." The thought sent a pang through my heart. My son, the boy I had raised, loved, protected. But that boy was gone, replaced by a weak, manipulated man. And the woman he married, she was a venomous parasite. "I am certain," I said, my voice steady. "Do it, Mr. Jenkins." I signed the papers. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet office. The house, my home for so many years, was no longer mine. But it was also no longer theirs. It was done. Chapter 5. The Shattered Illusion. The next day, my phone rang. It was Sarah, my sweet granddaughter. Her voice was frantic, bordering on hysterical. "Grandma, you have to come. There's a strange man here. He says he bought the house. Mom and Dad are screaming. They're saying you can't do this." My heart ached for her, for the innocent child caught in the crossfire of her parents' greed and my righteous fury. "Sarah, listen to me, sweetheart," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "Tell your mother and father that I sold the house. It is no longer theirs. They have 24 hours to remove their belongings before the new owners take possession. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." A gasp from Sarah. Then a muffled shout from Amber in the background. "She sold it? That old witch? She can't? It's ours?" "She did, Amber," I heard Sarah say, her voice trembling. "Grandma sold it." Amber's voice, now a piercing shriek. "Tell her she'll pay for this. Tell her we'll sue her." "Tell your mother. She should have thought about that before she left me stranded in the desert," I said, my voice cold, devoid of emotion. "She has no legal standing. The house was mine, And now it's gone. I hung up. The silence that followed was heavy, but for the first time, it was a silence of peace, of justice. The calls started immediately, from David, from Amber, dozens of them, angry, desperate, pleading, threatening. I blocked their numbers. I wouldn't listen. I wouldn't be manipulated. Not anymore. They tried to challenge the sale. They hired lawyers. But Mr. Jenkins had been thorough. The paperwork was ironclad. The legal transfer was never completed. I was the rightful owner. Their claims were baseless. They had no leg to stand on. The full weight of their consequences crashed down on them. They had spent the money I had given Chris, assuming the house would be their permanent asset. They had lived beyond their means, squandering the generosity. Now they were truly, utterly broke and homeless. The eviction notice came again, this time from the new owners. David and Amber, screaming, shouting, furiously packing what they could, were forced to leave the house. The house I had given them. The house they had lost. I received a tearful call from Sarah a few days later. They were staying in a cheap motel. Her voice was filled with despair. "Grandma, Mom and Dad, they have nothing. They're so angry. What are we going to do?" My heart ached for Sarah. She was innocent. She was the only connection to the kind, loving boy my son used to be. "Listen, sweetheart," I said, my voice softening. "This isn't your fault, and you will be okay. I promise." I didn't offer to help David and Amber. Not directly. They had made their bed. They had to lie in it. But Sarah was different. Chapter 6. The True Inheritance. The money from the house sale sat in my bank account. A substantial sum. More than enough to secure my own future, my independence, my quiet, peaceful life in my new small home. I had lived a life of frugality, of hard work, of saving. And now, I had what I had earned, what was rightfully mine. But Mom's letter, her final plea, protect his children. I called Mr. Jenkins again. "I want to set up a trust fund," I told him, "for my granddaughter Sarah, for her education. Something her parents cannot touch, something that will truly secure her future." He agreed, understanding immediately. The paperwork was drawn up. A significant portion of the house sale proceeds went into a secure, untouchable trust for Sarah's future. It was the only way to ensure that her parents' poor choices, their greed, and their inability to manage their own lives would not irrevocably damage hers. I kept a comfortable amount for myself, enough to live out my days with dignity, without worry. The rest, a much smaller sum, I sent to a charity for homeless veterans, a cause Robert, my late husband, had always supported. It felt right, a way to give back without enabling the very people who had tried to destroy me. I severed all direct ties with David and Amber. They continued to try to contact me, but I blocked their numbers. I didn't answer their letters, filled with venom and accusations. I needed to protect my peace, my sanity, my future. It wasn't easy. The pain of losing my son, the son I thought I knew, was a constant ache. But it was a different kind of pain now. Not the sharp, burning agony of betrayal, but the dull throb of a dream shattered. A dream of a loving, intact family. I grieved for the son he used to be, and for the man he had become. My only continued connection was with Sarah, my granddaughter. She called me often, cautiously at first, then more freely. She told me about her life, about her parents' struggles. They had moved from one cheap motel to another, then to a tiny, overcrowded apartment. Chris still struggled with his addiction, never truly facing it. Amber still blamed everyone but herself. But Sarah was resilient. She was a bright, intelligent girl. blossoming into a strong young woman. I supported her emotionally, guided her, advised her, and she knew about the trust fund. She knew her future was secure. It gave her hope. It gave her a path. Chapter 7. The True North. My new life in the smaller house blossomed. It was quiet, peaceful. I decorated it simply, with the few treasured items I had saved: the quilt, the photo albums. They were symbols of my past, but also of my resilience. I volunteered at the local library, a place of calm and quiet contemplation. I joined a gardening club, my hands finding solace in the soil. I made new friends, people who knew nothing of my past, nothing of the painful drama that had unfolded. I was simply Martha, a strong, independent woman, living out her golden years with grace and dignity. The memory of that day on the highway still haunted me sometimes. The heat, the dust, the sight of their car disappearing into the distance. It was a scar, a reminder of human cruelty. But it was also a reminder of my own strength, my ability to survive, to fight back, to reclaim what was mine. I thought of Mom's letter often, her burden, her faith in my strength. I realize now that her decision, though misguided in its execution, came from a place of desperate, sacrificing love for Chris. She knew she couldn't fix him. She hoped I could, by forcing him to hit bottom. It was a terrible, beautiful, and ultimately heartbreaking act of a mother's love. The house, my former home, was no longer a symbol of their greed or my betrayal. It was the instrument of my liberation. It had given me the means to secure my own future and, more importantly, to ensure Sarah's. My relationship with David was irrevocably broken, the wound too deep, the trust shattered beyond repair. It was a painful truth to accept, but I learned to accept it, to let go of what could not be salvaged. And Sarah, my granddaughter, she was my light, my future. She would go to college. She would build her own life. She would not be defined by the mistakes of her parents. She would be free. And that, I realized, was the true legacy, the true inheritance. Not money, but freedom, and the unwavering, unbreakable bond of love between a grandmother and her granddaughter. I sat on my small porch, sipping a cup of tea, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. The air was cool now, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. Peace. It had been a long, arduous journey, but I had found it, and I was finally, truly home.